Imagine standing on an open plain in the dead of January, the wind screaming across the grasslands at 40 miles per hour. The temperature has plummeted to 30 below 0 Celsius, negative 22 Fahrenheit, and the wind chill makes it feel even worse. Your skin would suffer frostbite in minutes. These not only survived winters like this, but thrived through them. The Lakota, the Cheyenne, the Arapaho, and dozens of other nations across the North American plains built a way of life so finely tuned to their environment that every single detail, from the angle of a tent pole to the way a buffalo robe was scraped, served a precise engineering purpose. And at the center of that life, standing against the worst winter on the continent, was a structure so deceptively simple that outsiders often underestimated it. A cone of wooden poles wrapped in animal hides, a tipi. But calling it tipi simple is like calling a Swiss watch simple because it fits on your wrist. The first thing to understand is who actually built these structures. It was the women. In nearly every Plains nation, the tipi belonged to the women of the household. They designed it, constructed it, maintained it, and when the community moved to follow the buffalo herds, they decided when to take it down and where to raise it again. This was one of the most critical responsibilities in the entire tribe, because without a properly built tipi, your family did not survive the winter. Construction began with the frame. 3 or 4 poles, each about 20 feet long, cut from straight grain cedar, were lashed together near the top using strips of buffalo sinew, creating a tripod, one of the most stable geometric forms in nature. 12 to 15 additional poles were layered around it, forming a conical skeleton that could flex in high winds without breaking, absorbing gusts the way a tree bends rather than snaps. The outer skin required up to 20 buffalo hides, each scraped clean, brain-tanned by hand until supple, smoked over low fire for water resistance, then rubbed with fat for a waterproof seal. The hides were stitched together using bone owls and sinew thread into a single covering that wrapped around the frame. The stitching was so precise that a well-made cover could last for years. But here is where the real genius begins. A winter tipi was a completely different machine from its summer version. A second layer of hide was hung from a rope inside the poles at about 7 feet off the ground, draped to the floor and anchored with stones. The gap between the outer wall and this inner liner created a dead airspace, the same insulating principle behind double-pane windows and down jackets. This simple addition could raise interior temperature by 20 degrees. Outside, families banked snow around the base, but left a careful air pocket to prevent rot from direct moisture contact. Some stuffed dried grass between the walls for additional insulation. Others added a partial ceiling flap inside to trap rising warm air. Every modification was a deliberate, tested solution to a specific problem. At the center of every winter tipi was the fire. And it was not just a heat source, it was the engine of an entire ventilation system. Fresh, cold air entered under the bottom edge of the inner liner, was drawn toward the flames, warmed, and rose, carrying smoke toward the smoke hole at the top. 2 adjustable flaps controlled by external poles could steer smoke away from the interior no matter which direction the wind blew. You could tune the airflow of your shelter the way you would adjust a thermostat. It was a passive ventilation system so elegant it worked in virtually every weather condition. For the coldest nights, some families dug underground tunnels from outside the tipi directly to the fire pit, feeding oxygen to the flames without letting cold drafts sweep the living space. Before sleep, they heated stones in the embers, wrapped them in hide, and tucked them under beds for hours of radiant warmth. And when the community needed to move, they sealed glowing coals inside buffalo horns plugged with clay, portable fire carriers that kept embers alive for days. You never had to start a fire from scratch in a blizzard. You carried your fire with you. Fuel management was another challenge solved with ingenuity. Hardwood was scarce on the treeless plains. The primary fuel was dried buffalo dung, which burns hot, burns clean, and produces remarkably little odor. Families stockpiled it through warmer months.
When even dung was scarce, twisted knots of dried prairie grass smoldered slowly like compact logs, stretching supplies through the season. Clothing followed the same layered logic as the teepee itself. The most prized winter garment was a buffalo robe from a late fall hunt when fur was thickest, brain-tanned and smoked for waterproofing, worn fur side in to trap body heat. A lighter calf skin underneath created a two-layer system with its own insulating air gap. This is the exact principle modern outdoor companies use when they tell you to dress in layers, but Plains people perfected it centuries earlier. Food preservation centered on pemmican, one of the most calorie-dense foods ever created by any culture. Dried buffalo meat, pounded into powder, mixed with rendered fat and wild berries, packed into rawhide bags. A single pound contained roughly 3,500 calories, enough for a full day of hard activity, lasting months without spoiling. Root vegetables were buried in bark-lined pits, where naturally frozen ground acted as a deep freeze. The camp itself was engineered for collective survival. Winter camps were arranged in circles, with every teepee door facing east, greeting the rising sun, but also turning away from the brutal westerly winds. The formation made the entire camp a collective windbreak. Inside each teepee, 8 to 10 people shared body heat with one small fire, pushing interior temperatures to 60 or 70 degrees Fahrenheit, while the world outside sat locked in lethal cold. This was not luck. This was millennia of observation, experimentation, and oral tradition, refined across more generations than we can count. What strikes you when you sit with all of this is how completely integrated every element was. The buffalo provided the hides, the sinew, the brains for tanning, the dung for fuel, the meat for pemmican, and the horns that carried the embers. Every part of the animal, every feature of the landscape, every pattern of the wind was understood and woven into a single cohesive way of living. Modern survivalists study these techniques because they work, because many outperform modern gear in the conditions they were designed for, and because they remind us that technology is not about complexity, it is about solving problems with whatever the world gives you. If this changed the way you think about history and human ingenuity, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment and tell me which technique impressed you most.